Hello everyone, this is El Spectra. Welcome back to the Land of Empires. And today I want to take a step back and make a slightly different video from our usual program of live gameplay. Basically this video as well as the next video, I want to take the opportunity to make a couple guides. This one, I want to go over the database. As some of you might know, this is the collective database that has the costs and various mini guides for aspects of the Land of Empires. And the next guide I want to make is about the Hall of Valor. I think there will be quite a few interesting things to talk about in terms of Hall of Valor mechanics. But starting out with the spreadsheet itself. I'm sure some of you are very familiar with this spreadsheet, but I want to take the opportunity to give people who may not be as familiar with this spreadsheet just an overview of the information that is contained in here. Now, first and foremost, the first page contains all the Land of Empires legendary heroes, and these are spread across Season 1, which is these four, Season 2, 3, all the way to Season 6, and I will put the pictures of them at a later point. And this is just really an overview of the heroes. You can see the descriptions of all their skills. And as you play more into the game, you'll have a better understanding of what each description, what they mean, how they perform in combat. And sometimes the description itself might not be what you expect. For example, unit HP. There are actually a few definitions for unit HP. There are skills that increase HP additively. So it increases the troops' HP by say 200%. And then there are skills that increases the HP possibly multiplicatively, which is increasing the unit's final HP by 200%. And as you read through these skills, you will start to pick up on a lot of the specific language that is used in the description. And the language actually has a lot of meaning behind them. And I think in a future video, I will go into more detail about the language of the combat mechanics. So that's page 1. For the next page is a very rough timeline of what you would expect across the different seasons as you progress into the Land of Empires. And please use this just as a very rough guide. These are not set in stone. In other words, when the first Holy Mountain battle will occur, that might not be exactly on the 5th week of the game. And to the right side, you will see the approximate cost of maxing an account in the Land of Empires. Now, at first glance, this might seem very intimidating. After all, if you want to rush an account to the maximum power by Season 5, I would expect to need over $120,000. Of course, this can be reduced to some degree through farming and through events. But if you want to rush a maxed account, this is the cost that you could expect. Of course, very few players actually have a max account. Actually, at this very moment in time, there are a total of 0 players with a max account. The closest player is called Nefisto from server 5, but unfortunately, after playing for a couple months, he quit for Call of Dragons. And yeah, just please use this as a reference, but by no means is this necessary to perform well. In my personal opinion, an account that spends a few $1,000s can perform absolutely well across all seasons as long as you build your heroes properly and build your stats properly. I know a lot of people focus on the wrong stats. For example, in the early seasons, they focus a little too much on cavalry. And by Season 6, the meta actually kind of switches from infantry and archer heavy to actually mostly infantry and a little bit of cavalry heavy. So you will find yourself having to switch your builds between seasons, switch your distribution of your stats. And now with Fable equipment, that is made much easier because you can simply kind of recycle your Fable equipments from one hero to the next. And between seasons, you could go from an archer-heavy, archer-centric Fable equipment build to an infantry-centric Fable equipment build. The next page is the start of the meat of really what makes this a database rather than kind of a guide. And these are summarizing the glorious costs for all glorious tiers, starting with glorious 1 all the way to glorious 10. Now, what I find very interesting about the power scaling in this game is that the cost per tier might seem to go up quite a lot. So you can see for Glorious 1, the City Hall only costs 132 sands of time, but by Glorious 10, it costs 800 sands of time per tier, per mini tier. However, the damage you gain from it is actually exponential. So do not worry about having to spend much more sands of time at the later upgrades. The power that you get from them really reflect the increased cost. So here I have a rough graph of the actual power gain that you get. It actually looks more like an exponential curve than a linear curve, but you kind of get the idea. As the total cost increases, you're not really min-maxing. You're actually getting a lot more power out of it. The next sheet summarizes the relic, metal, and gem costs. As you notice, the later tiers, they really increase in costs. But I just want to spend a little bit of time just going over the sources of these materials. So for relics, unfortunately, there is no special way to farm them besides altar. And when the Battle of Disorder starts, you'll be farming them inside the Battle of Disorder, and you'll actually be getting a bit more relics than what you would usually get if you farm the altar. So farm the altar like your life depends on it, because that is really the only long-term source of relics. And this is really what kind of makes old server players much stronger than newer server players. They have had a much longer time to farm these relics, metals, and gems. So the main source of metals, the materials can be farmed in Apex Arena as well as the arena of... Actually, you cannot farm them in the Apex Arena. You mostly farm them from the Arena of Legends, and you can buy these scrolls from the Mysterious Shop. So a majority of your scroll income will come from the Mysterious Shop. Bellows, you will gain these at a faster rate than scrolls and Pyronites. So you will be farming bellows through Chaos of Hell, Alliance Tournament, and to some extent Legends Arena and the shop itself. Hammers, you farm these purely from the Legends Arena, and I don't really account for the cost of hammers in this calculation because you can simply farm so many of them in the Legends of Arena that they are never the bottleneck. So the main bottleneck for metals will be Pyronites. And there are currently no easy way to really farm Pyronites outside of Chaos of Hell and Alliance Tournament, as well as a couple events. But so in order to really rush metals, I would focus on buying Pyronites. As for gems, the arenas are the main source of gem farming, long-term gem farming. If you want to build a strong account that will stay strong in the long term, I recommend you to be capable of consistently reaching top 4 in Apex Arena and top 3 in the Arena of Legends. Only by doing that can you kind of stay ahead of the power curve compared to your peer players. Otherwise, you'll just have to buy these gems, these clamps, because there are just no other event that really allows you to farm them at a consistently high rate. And as you can see, the costs are very high at the later tiers, and you would want to keep up because the scaling, as I mentioned previously for Glorious, the scaling for gems is also fairly linear. The scaling actually for everything in this game is fairly linear. Although the cost becomes higher, the power scaling also scales appropriately. The next page is the Titanos, and the divide between the Titanos are the Moonbane and Nightsaber group versus the Odin, Windstrider, and Chaos group. As you would notice, the costs for Odin, Windstrider, and Chaos are slightly more than Moonbane and Nightsaber, and the key characteristics of these latter 3 dragons, or Titanos I should say, is that the stats, which I don't really show here, but the stats actually start out much more even and higher than Moonbane and Nightsaber. In order to get good stat utility out of Moonbane and Nightsaber, you must resonate them. If they are not resonated, your stats will be very low compared to, say, a level 100 Odin Windstrider, or Chaos. Even at level 100, Odin, Windstrider, and Chaos would have superior stats compared to a level 200 non-resonated Moonbane or Nightsaber. So please keep that in mind. And personally, I'm not a big fan of resonating the dragons because I think even stat-wise, they become quickly outdated, and you don't really get extra skill levels when you resonate them. So it is purely from a stat standpoint. Although 40% bonus stats across all stat types might be quite impactful, especially if it helps you gain the edge in either the Arena of Legends or Apex Arena. For people who are already ahead, it might not be the greatest investment. Next one is the formations. Now, formations are actually really important, and you want to get them to a relatively strong state, to a relatively max state, I should say, relatively early once they come out. I believe formations come out in season 1, whereas hollow square formations, they come out at the beginning of season 2. So you would want to kind of rush formations because from preliminary testing, these appear to be a direct multiplier to your base stats. In other words, if your base stats is 1,000%, for example, and you have 500% formation stat, then you end up with like a 5,000% base stats. So formations are definitely important and are very impactful in actual combat. So if you focus on infantry formation and archer formation, you'll be pretty well set for season 1 through 5. In season 6, you would of course want to already have infantry as well as cavalry formations maxed. If you want to be one of the strong power players, you definitely want these formations maxed as soon as possible. Now, the only exception to formations is the echelon. You will need VIP 12 to max the infantry echelon formation. So for people who want to have a much bigger advantage versus other people, you would definitely want to be VIP 12 and then buy the infantry echelon formation for about $500. So with $500, you'll be able to max the infantry echelon formation. And I think that is really a requirement if you want to stay on top of Apex and the Arena of Legends. Next is equipment. And equipment, you start out with legendary gold gear. Personally, I wouldn't focus so much on this, but thankfully, an interesting aspect about equipment is the EXP cost. So you use enhancement stones to tier up and enhance not tier up, just to upgrade the stars of the equipment. They call it enhancing. And the good thing about it is that when you salvage the equipment, you get back 100% of the enhancement EXP you used in the form of the basic enhancement gem. So do not worry about upgrading equipment. You will only be losing 20% of the materials, which is the tier drawing and tier inscriptions you use to tier up the equipment. Once you get access to Fable gear, which is when you get access to the Battle of Disorder, which should start around season 2, then you will be replacing a majority of your legendary equipment, meaning that you will be actually salvaging your legendary equipment to upgrade your Fable gear, because the Fable gear just provides so much more stats than legendary equipment, even at the maxed tier upgrade. And notice that the EXP for legendary equipment is just so much higher, especially at tier 3, than the cost of upgrading one tier for Fable equipment. So the tier is whatever this value is multiplied by 5. So it's like 22,500. No, 30 something thousand per tier. And Fable equipment is really what gives you the flexibility of equipping different teams with the best gear. So it really gives a power boost to the main team that you're running. And that is very important in Arena. So finally, we are reaching the last page really of the database. And these just summarize the VIP cost. So to reach VIP 12, you need to accumulate 4.8 million VIP experience. And if you want to get that through gems only, it will cost you 9.6 million gems. For hero shards, season 1 through 4, as well as season 6 heroes, cost a total of 1,200 fragments. So it costs 10 fragments to summon them and 1,190 fragments to upgrade them to the maximum star. Now, my thoughts around upgrading heroes is that, with the exception of Season 6, I believe that all heroes with the exception of Season 5, I believe that all heroes Season 1 through Season 4 do not really require maximum stars to perform well. Season 5 is a little bit of an exception because they actually have very, very impactful awakening skills. I will probably go over that in another video, but in my opinion, 8-star heroes are more than enough to perform at almost their maximum potential. For Season 5 heroes, they cost a total of 1,450 to summon and max. And finally, this is the cost to level up your Lord level. And the Lord level, as people know, they are used to increase the talent skills. So this table is currently incomplete because there are 100 Lord levels. Only a couple people I know have reached a level 100, and I really do not recommend rushing this because it is prohibitively expensive for very little gain. This is a summary of disorder rewards. So this is mostly focusing on Sands of Time as well as Fable equipment materials. So if you guys are Season 2, you can take a look at this. And special thanks for Pyrac for collecting this data. Now this page is a little outdated. It covers the server as well as server-wide rewards for some of the spending events. I wouldn't put too much thought into this. It is quite outdated. This is a summary of Battle of Chosen spending events. So the holy trial that goes on when you have the Battle of Chosen. And this is probably a little outdated as well. I wouldn't pay too much attention to this. Basically, all of these were made back in Season 3 or 4, so they are a little bit outdated. So the remaining sheets, I will actually create another video to talk about the combat mechanics, details around the combat mechanics of this game, which are fairly simple but also interesting as well. So this will be for another video where I will talk about, for example, how changes in troop count will affect the damage. I think many of you will be pretty interested in learning how combat works in this game. And we are only able to figure this out through fairly extensive testing, and there are still many more things that needs to be tested. All right, so this is the database sheet that many of you have seen. And this was my overview of the sheet. Hope some of you enjoyed it. Hope some of you learned something new about it. And I'll see everyone in the next video.